Welcome to Jim Cantelon Today, interviews and Bible teaching for the 21st century. I know a lot of you have tuned in to today's program because you want to hear the next interview with Todd Cantelon. Todd is my oldest son, and he's a pastor. He's also a television producer and an author, but he, with his brother Jess and his sister Kate, grew up in Jerusalem, Israel. And we started last week talking about his upbringing, and we'll continue in this interview. It's absolutely fascinating. Even I know it all from him, but I love hearing it. And we'll do our Bible study after that. Stay with us.
Jim Cantelon Today is a program dedicated to the teaching of the good news of Jesus Christ. This all through the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. JCT also brings to you encouraging testimonies and stories from Christian leaders all over the globe. If this program has added value to your life, would you please consider becoming a partner? To do so, simply contact us by phone, mail, or online.
I know a lot of you have been waiting for this interview with Todd Cantelon. Todd is my oldest of two sons, one daughter. He's a pastor, he's an author. I've told you about that already off the opener. But last week, we got into his upbringing in Israel. He grew up in Israel, as did his brother and sister. And I had the great fortune and blessing of being their dad in that process. But Todd, last week, we left it just as you were in school, Paula and David Ben-Gurion Elementary School, yeah. All Hebrew. You didn't know a word of Hebrew when you went there. Mm-hmm. And you not only had the peer pressure of all your little friends who spoke nothing but Hebrew and were giving you a hard time as the only blonde-haired Christian in the bunch, yeah. But you had this wonderful principal by the name of Yafa. Mm-hmm. What did she do for you?
I mean, to put it simply, she cared. Again, I wonder, you look back, you go, I wonder, someone told her, hey, this, Canadian kid is coming to your school, you better make sure he integrates. Like, would she even have been instructed? Was it just the kindness of her own heart?
They know the sensitivity, though, to immigrants.
For sure, yeah. But I mean, this is 1981,
you
know, at the time it was, there wasn't a lot of Western immigration into Israel at the time, let alone any immigration. No. It was before the Russian wave, it was before any of that. So I wonder, but she was kind. She really took an interest in me. I mean, you remember me as a child. I was a fairly friendly soul, bright-eyed, beautiful little boy, if I do say so myself. When I was a little kid, like I look at pictures and go, wow, this is a winsome little child. Yeah. And so I was not rude, I was polite, I was hardworking, I was focused, and so certainly the kind of kid, now that I'm an adult, that an adult would respond to. Mm-hmm. And so she just sat me down upstairs in the library and began teaching me Hebrew from scratch, right from the first letter in the alphabet. Through to beginning to read and then learning to write, and it took 3 months. So 3 months, I would go, I guess the first half of the morning I'd be just with her, and then they would put me down in the classroom for the rest of the day. When you're just little like that in Israel, of course, you're going to school 6 days a week. Yep. And so the school day ends around 12:30. So I'd basically do a couple hours with her, have recess, be in the class for a couple of hours, and then, you'd go home. What
amazed me about that was you're not only learning a new language, but you were really basically getting half time in the classroom.
Yeah.
But within 3 to 4 months, you were fluent, and by the end of the school year, you were in the top 5 in your class.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
I mean, go figure. How's that happen?
I don't know. I always loved life. I always loved learning. I loved reading. I loved listening. I was an active participant. So, again, it's so sobering as you grow older. You look at kids who perhaps don't have the experiences you had as a kid or don't have the advantages you had as a kid. I wasn't... What credit can I take for anything that I did as a little boy? I'm 7 years old. I don't know from anything. So you're just kind of reacting and responding. And so, I knew that my teachers loved me. They took an interest in me. The kids in my class were very interested in me. I mean, I looked like an alien compared to the average Israeli child. Israelis at that time, fairly homogenous, fairly short, dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed. tightly knit, almost stereotypically Middle Eastern, and I was fairly thin, tall, blonde, blue-eyed child. So I really stuck out, and so this kind of gave me an entree into almost every social group. So from my perspective as a kid, once I could communicate, it was easy pickings. I had a great time.
Yeah. One of my favorite memories were those, it would always happen, and when it would happen on a Friday afternoon, just before Shabbat began. Now,
Sure.
Shabbat is Sabbath, and at the very moment the sun sets in Jerusalem, there's this huge horn that you hear all through the city. And that signals the beginning of Shabbat, which means no more working, no more driving a car, no more taking public transport, all those work-oriented things.
Yeah.
There would be this little knock at the door. And it took me a few weeks before I realized that it's same old, same old. I knew exactly what would be on the other side of the door. I'd open the door and there would be an Orthodox Jew, a man, with a black hat, curly locks, long black jacket, and tzitzit, that means strings hanging from his prayer shawl. And in his, they would even try English. They would mutter at me in Hebrew, and eventually I knew what they were wanting. They needed you or Jess to come with them to do what?
Yeah, turn the lights on.
Turn their lights on.
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's Shabbat. You can't strike a fire on the Sabbath.
And they had automatic systems that would fail.
Yeah, so go get the goy and have him do it.
Get the local
Funny,
heathen.
I was in the Old Testament just the last few months, and it seems to me like even the non-Jews who were part of the camp of the Israelites had to abide by the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So looking back, I realized what callous behavior that was, really, to have the local goy come and turn on the lights. That's not the model I see in the Old Testament, but be that as it may, I was
Calloused on their part, not on your part.
on their part, yeah.
Yeah.
Because if I'm part of the camp of Israel,
Yeah.
which in the broad sense, as a stranger and sojourner living in Israel, I shouldn't have been breaking the Sabbath either. But yeah, they'd have us come and switch
Yeah,
the
we were
lights
living
on.
in Rehavia, which is downtown Jerusalem, and right behind us was an ultra-Orthodox community, and that's where they were coming from. Your education there was essentially a secular education. You weren't going to an Orthodox school. You were going to a secular Israeli school. But they still taught the Bible.
Yeah, we do Tanakh every day.
Tanakh.
Yeah, we'd have an hour every day.
What amazed me the first time I heard it, and then I actually, kind of got used to it over the years. The teachers in our parent-teacher interviews would always tell us that our three kids were the top kids in Bible in the Israeli school system in Jerusalem. I mean, go figure.
Well, raised in a family of God-fearers, we'd have a high view of the Bible even as little kids.
Yeah.
And again, the way you study Tanakh when I was a kid in the Israeli school system is it's very yeshiva-based. You would just read. So imagine a classroom with a U-shaped setup of the tables, and everyone sits around the U-shape, and literally we would read through a whole chapter or just keep going, and each kid would have to read a section.
Like they do in the synagogue.
Yeah, from front to back.
Yeah.
And so that's all you do is you read it. And then the teacher would reflect on it almost like a rabbi would. You just read. And so
Now, when you read it. You didn't do it in a sing-song kind of way.
No, because we're not Orthodox. But we would read it, and we'd read it in the Old Testament, like not in modern Hebrew.
Yeah.
And we were specially graded on getting the pronunciation right.
Right.
So you'd have to, because obviously they want you to be able to understand. So it's incredible for me now these days when I'm preaching. I'm still, if I'm in the Old Testament, I'm still working from the original text in the original Hebrew, and it comes as easily now as it did when I was 10.
And I've heard you preach several times at your church, Grace Community in Guelph, and many times you will use a Hebrew word here or there.
Sure.
I think the first year or so you were there, the people were kind of shocked and amazed. What is he doing? Speaking in tongues? What's he up? And your brother Jess, who also is a pastor, every service, when he pronounces the benediction, the blessing on the people,
Yeah.
he does it in Hebrew.
Yeah, it's nice. Funny, there's a guy at our church, he's new there, he and his family, and coming out of nominal Catholicism, and just found out last week, an email was sent to me, just they're loving what's happening at Grace, and he was saying he prayed for months for the Lord to lead them to a new church, and he said he asked for it to be a Bible-believing church that was non-denominational, where the Spirit was alive and the preacher preached the Bible, and ideally, Lord, if he could speak Hebrew.
Come on.
So
You gotta be kidding.
Yeah, so when he showed up at Grace, he said, wow, God must be listening. So to me, it's just normal. I mean, if you're in the Old Testament, you ought to do every Thursday, when I'm preaching, I work every day of the week except Monday in terms of on the text. And so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is always the language day. So if I'm in the New Testament, I'm always in Greek. If I'm in the Old Testament, I'm always in the Hebrew. It's nice to have some roots in the language for sure.
And as a preacher and a commentator, and I wear that hat too, it's a tremendously liberating and challenging thing to actually get into word study. You know, you don't have to be really proficient. I'm not proficient in Hebrew, but I can get along and work on my dictionary and my Old Testament Hebrew Bible. And the nuances that jump out of the Hebrew language just do not jump out of the English.
No, it's true. It's true. And the other thing that I find most interesting as well is I would call it maybe cultural memory. So having grown up in Israel and really kind of understanding Jewish culture to some degree, having been raised in that context, there are many times when I'm in the Old Testament and there's a shading, if you will, to not just the word, but to the sentence, to the paragraph, to the event, to the moment, where you just kind of realize, you get a sense, a feeling of what that moment would have felt like from even a modern Jewish perspective. And of course, there's some interesting connections between modern and ancient Judaism that are quite profound. And so oftentimes the text will gain an added layer because of the affinity and love I have for Judaism and the facility with which kind of its shadings kind of come to me. And so if that helps illumine the text in a way that brings God glory and encourages his people, great.
You've been spending a lot of time in the Old Testament in your preaching. You do lengthy series. I remember, was it last year, you did a long series on the patriarchs?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, as we're filming, we're back in Patriarchs. So I start every new year in Genesis, so until we finish the book. So Lord willing, next year we'll finish Genesis. So this year we're kind of in the midsection. So this year it's called Patriarch: A Love Story. Next year it'll be called Patriarch: The Impossible Dream. So next year is Joseph, and we'll finish the book. This year, of course, is Isaac and Jacob and Rebekah and Rachel, and of course the love story between Esau and Jacob, which is also quite lovely. So yeah, since I've been at Graces, I'm in my third year there now. So for the last 2 Januaries, I've started the year in Genesis.
Esau and Jacob, you say a love story. It was not really a love story.
Well, look at how it ends.
That's true.
The fact that Esau forgives him. That sequence at the end when he's chasing him down and Jacob's running for his life.
Jacob figures he's going to be killed by his brother.
Esau's not coming to hurt him.
No.
And Esau, in fact, says, I'm not even mad anymore because God's been good to me also. Beautiful.
You know, it's interesting. He became the founding patriarch, if you will, of the Edomites, as they were called, which they lived south of Judea, down in that desert area on the way down to Eilat. But out of the Edom context came the Idumeans. Herod, King Herod, was half Idumean. But they considered Jerusalem and the temple to be their place of worship too.
Sure.
They were related. They were brothers, right?
Yeah, I really appreciate the messy family ties that are on display in the Old Testament patriarchal families. It encourages me when I look at the mess of my own life, when I look at the mess in the lives of my people. I go, thank God, we're biblical. We'll fit right in.
I'm your dad. What are you talking about? Mess of your own life.
Touché.
We're going to pick up next week with Todd Cantelon. So fascinating for me personally with my eldest here, but also I think for you too, to hear from someone who grew up in Israel and knows Israel like the back of his hand. We'll take a little break. I'll be back with our Bible study portion right after this.
JCT TV is the official voice of WOW, working for orphans and widows. Jim Cantelon is the founder of WOW and has been ministering to orphans and widows in distress for 18 years. WOW's focus is home-based care for the dying. The horizon is vast, with thousands of the least of these in Africa and India. WOW depends on your generous support. To connect with us, you can call us at 1-800-969-9551, or you can visit us online at wowmission.com.
So Jesus has just said to his disciples, they asked him, and we looked at this a few weeks ago, so what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? That's in verse 3 of Matthew 24 here. He started answering, and I've been going through that very slowly. Last week I spent the whole time on what he said about the gospel being preached throughout the world, to all the world, and then the end would come. That's verse 14. Okay, picking up at verse 15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, and then in brackets, whoever reads, let him understand. That would be from Matthew. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who's on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house. Let him who's in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days, and pray that your flight may not be in winter or on Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. I know that Josephus is not, popular reading out there. You can Google Josephus, and you'll, see him referenced and get his history, and you may be able to get some, if not all, of the Wars of the Jews. Although if you download that, it's going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of words. But he is the only trusted historian, if you will, of that Roman era, who gives us insights into the time of Jesus and the time after Jesus, immediately after his death and resurrection. And the Wars of the Jews talk about the various conflicts that the Jewish people had with Rome, not just in Jerusalem, but in Caesarea, in the lower Galilee, Jericho, Sepphoris, Samaria. I mean, there was fighting going on all of the time, and Palestine was just a little sandbox relative to the size of the greater Roman Empire. It's the Roman Empire. It was amazing, all the way from Britain down to Egypt, northeast over to Babylon, back up, through Syria, and it was huge, humongous. The Romans ruled the world. And so this little bit, where the Israelites lived was inconsequential, but they had more, high maintenance, if you will, than perhaps any other area that the Romans ruled. So it was a place of a lot of conflict. When you read Josephus's Wars of the Jews, and you get to, and it's hours and hours of reading. I'm not, going to mislead you here. But when you read it, you get to the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD and the ultimate victory of Titus, who was Vespasian's son. Well, it's just unbelievable. Really, you read his account and you say, how can this be? Jerusalem was awash in bodies, awash in blood. And it wasn't just from conflict with the Romans. More of it was from conflict within Jerusalem itself, from 2, if not 3 groups of political zealots, as they were called. One horrible zealot who was a leader, his name was Simon. Killing each other. Nasty, horrible beheadings, disembowelings. Horrible stuff. And so that's going on. The battle around the walls is going on. Titus, with he way outnumbers the Jews, but the walls of Jerusalem are so secure, and the fury and passion of these zealots fighting the Romans when they weren't fighting each other was so almost overwhelming at times that it took forever for the Romans to prevail. At one point, as people are trying to escape, and as they tried to escape the besieged city, they weren't just escaping the Roman besiegement, they were escaping their own people the zealots who were killing them, if they saw somebody who looked like he was defecting, they just lop his head off, just without question, or run him through. Woman, child, old man, old lady, it didn't matter to them. They were not going to yield to the Romans, and so they would kill their fellow Jews as traitors. But some would make it through. Titus built a huge wall all around the circumference of the city. And I lived there for 7 years. I know what a massive undertaking that would be. I mean, these Roman soldiers, man, they did a lot more than wield a sword. They wielded pickaxes and shovels. And I mean, you talk about working from dawn till dusk. Anyway, we're talking here about huge conflicts going on. Now, it's interesting, Jeremiah, if you read Jeremiah, if my memory serves me correctly here, 19, you read that and you wonder if somehow he hadn't read Josephus, even though Josephus hadn't written for, another couple thousand years past Jeremiah's time. His prophetic insights were just absolutely amazing. But the point being that when Jesus is talking here about the desolating sacrilege, the abomination of desolation, he's talking about something that goes beyond one event. Now, the desolating sacrilege, or the abomination of desolation, as it's called, was first spoken of by the prophet Daniel, and he talks about this desolating sacrilege, that's what the Hebrew literally means, or this abomination of desolation, as standing in the holy place. Now, what stands? It's got to be a human being, it's got to be a statue. In this case, generally seen by Bible scholars as reference to the statue of Zeus, which was set up in the temple by Antiochus IV, who was king of Syria in 168 BC. This became sort of the bar set for sacrilege. It was the low point in terms of Israel, that this statue to Zeus would be raised right where the Holy of Holies was in the temple. But there were so many other desolations, sacrilegious desolations that occurred afterwards, not the least of those being what happened during the siege of Israel, or the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD. In fact, 68, 69, 70. The very thing that Jesus prophesied when he said, you see this temple here, one stone will not be left upon the other. And they said, what? Some of those stones, friends, were in metric, they would be 10, 12, 13 meters long, 2 meters thick, 3 meters wide sometimes. I mean, they were so strong, so big, and so artfully cut that they didn't even need mortar. And the Roman siege engines had no success against most of those stones. Jesus said, one will not be left upon the other. Well, eventually that's exactly what happened. Eventually the Romans prevailed. But any further desolation of the holy place would bear the marks of that original in one way or another. And in this case, during the Jewish wars, the temple was turned into a garrison and a fortress. And these zealots who took over the temple, who were killing their own people with impunity, sometimes killing more of their own people than they were Romans, took all of the holy accoutrements, the various gold-made, ladles and cups and things that served the altar. The temple was lined with gold at one point. There was billions of dollars of stuff, in storerooms and so on, but all for holy purposes. Well, these guys used it for their own evil, vile, wicked purposes, killing their own people, and in many cases used some of the gold, smuggling it out to trade with foreign nations to bring money back to help them, in the work that they were, or I should say in the fight that they were fighting against the Romans. So there were all kinds of desolations that occurred there, especially when it was turned into a garrison and a fortress. And Jesus saw many desolations to come. So when he refers to the desolation, the abomination of desolation that Daniel talked about, he's not only looking back to 168 BC, but he's looking forward to many desolations that are to come. And especially, as I say, those that occurred in the time of Titus. Jesus knew what he was talking about. But you need to understand, friends, as you're reading this, that this is a multi-layered, multi-level desolation, sacrilege of the temple.
Friends, as you know, Jim Cantelon has been offering Cantelon's Casual Commentary as a Bible study supplement to his ongoing exposition of St. Matthew's Gospel on JCT TV. He's excited to offer Volume 4, which completes the Matthew study. The Transfiguration, Triumphal Entry, Crucifixion, and Resurrection of Jesus Christ are all covered in this volume. Like the first 3 volumes, it's concise, captivating, and casual. To order your copy, you can call, write, or go online. Write to Jim Cantelon today, Post Office Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7, or call us at 519-415-8341. You can also order online at jimcantelontoday.com. Request Cantelon's Casual Commentary Volume 4, and for a gift in any amount, it will be sent to you. When you place your order, also consider becoming a monthly partner. Remember, your gifts help us build this ministry.
Now, friends, when you support WOW, Working for Orphans and Widows, you are supporting JCT, because JCT is now the official spokesman for WOW. You see the promo on every show, where we are working with orphans and widows on a large scale in Sub-Saharan Africa, now moving into India, East Africa, and West Africa, in Tanzania and Ghana. We're expanding our horizons huge, big time, and we really want you to support that. And when you do that, WOW will cover the costs of JCT. But together, ultimately, what we're doing in terms of James 1:27 is we're visiting orphans and widows in their distress, especially those who are dying. Log on to wowmission.com and see for yourself. And don't forget, Cantelon's Casual Commentary. It's still available to you, friends, in 4 tranches. Happy to send it to you. And when you ask for it, remember your best support, will you? For Working for Orphans and Widows. I'm Jim Cantelon. Thanks for watching. See you again next time.
Contact us. Jim Cantelon today. P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7. If you're sending a check, make it payable to Jim Cantelon today. Or visit us online at jimcantelontoday.com and click Support.